Welcome to St. Lucy's Guide, a podcast by and for those of us with a disability, and for all who champion our inclusion. Together, we dive deeper into our faith to help our church become a place where everyone truly belongs. I'm pleased to introduce our host, Bob Furtado, a blind public scholar in the field of disability theology. Journey with us into a realm where the rich knowledge and imagination of theologians intersect with the lived realities, fears, and frustrations of disability. Guided by St. Lucy, we move around the walls of prejudice and false teachings, avoiding the pitfalls of misnomers as we head toward that clearing where all have a home. Open your heart, clear the path, and join us as we begin this journey. This is St. Lucy's Guide.
Welcome to St. Lucy's Guide, a podcast where theology meets lived experience. Again, my desire is to have you use these ideas in the faith that you practice. Today, we explore a rich and often overlooked topic in Catholic thought, the interpersonal dimension of the Catholic Church. What does it mean to say the Church is not just an institution, but a network of relationships, human and divine? What is the interpersonal dimension? At its core, the interpersonal dimension refers to the way the church exists between persons. It's not just a structure or a hierarchy. It's fundamentally a communion of relationships grounded in shared faith. Theologically, this idea emerges clearly in the New Testament. Early Christians communities formed not through systems and programs, but through person-to-person encounters, one believer sharing Christ with another. This interpersonal spread of faith is central to how the church grows and sustains itself. In fact, Catholic ecclesiology emphasizes that the church is, at its deepest level, a fellowship of persons, thinkers like Conger, and the teachings of the Second Vatican Council describe the church as a communion before it is an institution. A better illustration can be the vertical and the horizontal dimensions. To understand the interpersonal nature of the church, we need to hold together two key relationships. First, the vertical, the relationship between the human person and God. And second, the horizontal, the relationship among human beings with the community. The church exists at the intersection of these two dimensions. Interpersonal communication in the church is not merely social, it's theological. It reflects both divine communion and human solidarity. This means that when Catholics gather, whether at Mass or in small groups or in acts of service, they are participating in something more than community life. They are entering into a shared participation in the life of God. Further, the communion, not individualism, that is to say, that one of the most challenging aspects of this teaching is its rejection of radical individualism. In Catholic theology, there is no such thing as a purely private Christianity. Faith is always relational. To believe is to be drawn into communion with others. To encounter Christ is to encounter his body, the church. As one theological reflection puts it, belief and fellowship are inseparable. Personal faith necessarily leads to communal belonging. This has profound implication. The church is not a club you join. It is a living body of relationships marked by diversity, tension, and grace. Further, love as the core of the interpersonal life. If the interpersonal dimension has a foundation, it is love, not merely emotional affection, but a committed, active concern for others. Catholic theology often describes the church as a community of love where members are called to one, listen to one another, two, to serve one another, three, to advocate for the vulnerable. This love is not abstract. It becomes concrete in acts of justice, care, and solidarity, especially towards those on the margins. In this way, the interpersonal dimension connects directly to the church's social mission. Also, the implication for today. What does this mean for us today? In a world shaped by digital communication, polarization, and isolation, the church's interpersonal dimension offers a countercultural vision: community over isolation, dialogue over division, relationship over transaction. It challenges parishes and individuals alike to ask, are we forming real relationships or just attending services? Are we embodying communion or simply coexisting? And for more practical application, this is not just about accessibility ramps or sign language interpreters, though those matter deeply. It is about something more foundational: how we see one another, how we relate, and how we build a church where everyone is recognized as a gift. Now, this has a history within it, and we find a shift within the Catholic doctrine, starting with the 1978 pastoral statement of the USCCB on persons with disabilities. This shift comes in the form of looking at a person with a disability as not simply a source of charity, but as a real creature of God. The statement makes it clear that there is no separate church, that everyone has a right to the sacraments and be involved within the church. This was carried on further in 1981 by St. John Paul II as he released statement for the dignity of work. We, with people with disabilities, have a right to work. We have a full right to participate in society. And he further developed this idea and drew upon the ability to have us be more integrated into the church. And more profoundly, the 2000 Jubilee year was for persons with disability. It moved for total integration of, of those of us with a disability within the church. It was a call for love for everyone, including those of us with a disability. Love gives meaning to the direction of our church. We find it further emphasized by Pope Francis regarding those of us with a disability. We need to be active members. We have a right to the sacraments and participate within parish life. So, how can this provide us with some practical applications? The church's vision of human dignity, the Catholic Church teaches that every person is created in the image and likeness of God. That includes those of us with physical, sensory, intellectual, or developmental disabilities. But here's the key: the dignity isn't something the church gives, it's something the church recognizes. In recent decades, the church documents have come out from the U.S. bishops, including that pastoral statement, emphasizing that those of us with a disability are not acts of charity, but objects of evangelization and need full participation in the life of the church. This means that we can contribute to the church's holiness. We reveal aspects of God's love others might overlook. We call the community to deeper compassion, patience, and solidarity. The interpersonal dimension begins with the recognition we can see this idea lived out in intentional communities, such as those created by L'Arche International and others, and find throughout the world a way that communities can incorporate those of us with a disability into a communal life, not simply within the church and church activities, but actually out in the community. Also, the idea from inclusion to communion. In many parishes, communion often means making room, but the interpersonal dimension pushes us further. It asks, are we building relationships? Are we forming communion? Communion means knowing people by name, listening to their stories, making space for their gifts, sharing life, not just pews. For example, a parishioner with autism might enrich the community with honesty, clarity, or deep spiritual sensitivity. A person who is blind may help others become more attentive to the word proclaimed. Someone with an intellectual disability may model trust, joy, or simplicity of heart. The church becomes more fully herself when these relationships flourish. A good example is Shelley Christensen's book, From Longing to Belonging, where she gives clear, detailed ways all faith based organizations can build a true place of community. When we face barriers that are seen and unseen, physical barriers are real, but interpersonal barriers are often run much deeper. Common challenges such as assumptions about what a person can or cannot do when they have a disability, or this fear of saying something wrong, or overprotection when it is unintentionally limits what people can participate with. These are the barriers that get in our way. Also, lack of representation in leadership, liturgical, ministry, or parish councils. These barriers aren't solved by policy alone, they are solved by encounter. Pope Francis often spoke about the culture of encounter, meeting people where they are, listening without judgment, and allowing ourselves to be changed by that relationship. But here we can find the benefits of hospitality training and toolkits for inclusion. We can find guidance by organizations such as the National Catholic Partnership on Disability, or Disability Belongs, or the Faith Inclusion Network. They can provide us ways that we as a parish can develop cultures of inclusion. For an illustration of some inclusions and the interpersonal dimension in action, a choir that changed everything. Parish welcomed a young adult with Down syndrome into its choir. His presence didn't just add a voice, it transforms the group's culture. Rehearsals became more patient, joyful, and relational. That meets people where they are. A catechesis learned tactile methods to teach a blind student preparing for confirmation. The relationship deepened when the catechesis owned faith and reshaped the parish's approach to the sacramental prep. We can find those examples as well. A parish council seat, a woman with cerebral palsy was invited to serve on the parish council. Her perspective shifted conversations about accessibility, hospitality, and parish priorities. These stories show that the interpersonal dimension is not theoretical, but is lived. What can parishes do? There are practical ways communities can strengthen interpersonal relationships with those of us with a disability. Start with listening sessions. Invite persons with disabilities and their families to share their experiences, or create opportunities for leadership, not just participation, but actual leadership. Offer disability awareness formation opportunities for clergy, the catechesis, ushers, and parish volunteers so they can learn how to be more welcoming. Encourage peer relationships, not just helpers, but genuine friendships. and celebrate gifts publicly, highlight ministry testimonies and contributions of parishioners with disabilities. These steps build a culture where belonging is not conditional, it's assumed. I'd like to conclude with some ideas. The interpersonal dimension of the church's relationship with those of us with a disability is ultimately about love, lived in community. It's about seeing Christ in one another. It's about letting go of fear and embracing encounter. It's about building a church where every person's presence is not just welcomed, but cherished. When persons with disabilities are fully included, not only physically, but relationally, the church becomes more whole, more human, and more like the body of Christ she is called to be. A bit of reflection. The interpersonal dimension reminds us that the church is not just something we believe in, it's something we live. It exists wherever a faith is shared, relationships are formed, love is practiced. Ultimately, the church is a communion of persons rooted in the communion of the Trinity, a divine relationship that overflows into human community. I would like to say that thanks for joining us on St. Lucy's Guide. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone and maybe start a conversation of your own. After all, this is where the church begins. And please leave any comments about how this experience resonates with you within any faith that you practice or your own personal experiences of how it has affected you. In that way, we can begin to build a dialogue among one another of all of us with a disability who practice our faith with an earnest and want to further the ability to have inclusion, a universal truth. Thank you.
If you like what you heard today, you can email us, like, share, and comment on Spotify, Facebook, or YouTube.